So welcome everyone to NOVA Scribes. Thank you very much for joining us. We are recording the meeting tonight. My name is Brian Tarallo, and I'm the Managing Director of Lizard Brain Solutions. Tonight we have an extremely special guest, Laurie Durnell, who is a co-president of the Grove Consultants. I'll talk a little bit about her in just a second to give her an introduction, but first a little bit about NOVA Scribes. And so for those of you who are joining us for the first time, NOVA Scribes is an open forum for visual practitioners to share their knowledge. We are anyone who uses visuals to move others. So that means graphic facilitators, graphic recorders, scribes, sketchnoters, video scribers, UX designers, visual consultants. And we have organized classes, usually here in the Northern Virginia area. And we do graphic jams and open spaces. And lately we've been doing a lot of webinars to share skills so that we can learn from each other. We have a meetup that's coming up, and it's available on our website. You can check it out at if you go to Meetup NOVA Scribes. We have sketching for design thinking. And if there's nothing else, let me go ahead and introduce Laurie Durnell. So she is the co-president of the Grove Consultants. And if you know anything about graphic facilitation or graphic recording, the Grove Consultants, they are they've been around the longest. They are the best graphic facilitation company in the world, I think. And in this webinar, what Laurie's going to be doing is she's going to be walking us through one of the cornerstone tools of the Grove, which is the Drexler Sibbet Team Performance Model. It's a foundational tool for them. It's a visual tool that they use as part of their team development process. And just a few things that Laurie wanted me to share about her. So she started in this line of work as a kayak instructor, taking groups out there on open water. And then she was a high ropes course instructor. And so she's really been working with teams for 25 years, and she's seen teams at their best. And now in business and in the organizational world, she still sees teams at their best and worst, but maybe not when they're panicking, near drowning, or about to fall out of a tree, but she can still tell. So she's been at the Grove for 21 years, and just her relationship with me, 9 years ago when I was first introduced to graphic facilitation, the person that told me, that introduced it to me, the first person I ever saw do graphic recording, a man by the name of John Ward, he said, you got to go to the Grove. You got to get trained in principles of graphic facilitation. And so I did, and Laurie was my trainer. So it's a real thrill for me to invite her and bring her and host her at NOVA Scribes. And without further ado, Laurie, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Brian. So I'm really delighted to be here hanging with the NOVA Scribes gang. And Brian, thank you very much for the generous introduction. So I'm just going to jump straight into sharing my screen and get this show on the road. And you should all be seeing my first slide. Is that up?
You were good, Laurie. Go ahead.
Oh, I was good? I couldn't hear a thing.
Yeah, we'd muted ourselves just to.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Getting ready to panic already.
You're good. You had it before.
Okay. Starting again. Here we go.
We've got
it. All right. So, welcome to an orientation to the Grove's Team Performance Model. This is the Grove's operating system for thinking about working with groups of people. So I've been using team performance with a wide variety of teams in the 21 years that I've been in Grove, including last year when I was working with the finance leadership team for a global company, huge, massive company. They were in a really tough place. They had indirect reporting relationships, some to corporate, some to global divisions, and that led to vastly different perspectives based on their geographies. They were not aligned on implementation of finance policies, and there was perceived uneven commitment to the team, and trust had really been eroded. They had a strong technical team lead, but he was really ineffective leading his team. So I'm guessing that you may have bumped into these kinds of situations yourself. So what can you do to identify and resolve the issues that are holding a team like this back? and invite a focused conversation that inspires commitment to change. So in this talk, I'm going to share with you how you can use the team performance model to understand the predictable stages of team development, and to be able to diagnose what's going on with teams so that you can plan an appropriate intervention that sets a team up for success. And I'm going to tell you right now that we're going to cover a lot of content, and I'll be doing some feedback back and forth a few times and give you an opportunity to do questions. So what would be really great is, as we go, if you have a question, pop it into chat. And then periodically we'll stop, or we might just stop right there on a particular slide. I've got chat up, and also Brian and Lauren are going to be flagging me when I stop to take a breath. So once again, totally invited. Put your questions into chat. So let's start. Think. What is a team? So right now, type into the chat when you think, what's one key quality that makes a team versus just some other group of people? And if you're new to Zoom, you go down on the bottom bar of your screen, and there's a little, once you mouse over it, you'll see a little window that says chat. So there we go. Let's look at some of the things that are coming in. We've got a lot on shared goals, mutual respect, working rhythms, shared commitment to each other. So there's a lot of consensus here on a common goal. All right, collaboration with vision. All right, well, let's see how the Grove defines what makes a team a team. And this work comes out of the work of John Katzenbach, who wrote a book called The Wisdom of Team. It's several years old now, and we find that this still has a lot of value. So teams have a common purpose. And I think a lot of you, when you said that we've got some kind of a shared goal, I think that that's kind of what you had in mind. It's a common purpose. It's an ultimate result that this team has been chartered or come together to achieve. They need each other's ability, and they need each other's commitment. So not only do I need to have a bunch of smart people on my team, but they actually have to be committed to the team and to the purpose. Otherwise, it's not a team. And one of the reasons that people get committed is that teams have goals for which all members are collectively and mutually accountable. Teams are highly interdependent. And I think that term, if there's any word on this whole slide that I want you to walk away with, is this idea of interdependency. So the interesting thing here is that if all these conditions aren't in place, you probably have what we call a work group. Now, let's take a moment and look at the difference between work groups and teams and clarify why you should care. And it's all about determining the level of interdependence on a team. So this slide shows an interdependence continuum using an Olympic metaphor. And on the far left side, we've got low level of interdependence. And this might be like the track part of the team. You know, I'm running the 440, you know, you're doing the high hurdles, et cetera. And we go there all together. We call ourselves a team, but the only thing that we do really is stand on the sidelines and cheer for each other. At the other end of the scale is a high level of independence. I have here the Costa Rican soccer team, for those of you who are football fans, and because were just so cool at the last World Cup. And in this situation, like a basketball team or an orchestra or something, everybody is really tracking what everybody else is doing at all the time. And I'm reliant on everyone else, even if I'm, down in the goal or if I'm striking on the goal. Now, what's in between is what we call the formidable middle, where I could work independently, or maybe I see benefits to collaboration. And often these are situations where there are handoffs. So if you think for a moment about the team that you're on, where are the handoffs on your teams? Are they going smoothly? Or does anything get dropped because perhaps it's not clear who's responsible? Or what about handoffs between departments or across the pond? So this is the place where most of the time I'm running my own race, and then there are certain places where we really need to have our teaming figured out, and that's where we're going to hand off the baton. And in my experience, what typically happens is that when the baton gets dropped, the two runners, probably not in a professional team like this, but the two teams look at each other and they go, you know, blah, 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 your fault, blah, 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 your fault. And there's a lot of finger pointing. So investing time in team development on highly interdependent teams will pay off on results. But if you try and do too much team development with folks who work mostly independently, you'll get resistance. So the secret sauce is to discover where the interdependent work is. Because that's where you want to invest your time in teaming. That's where teaming adds value. So let's take a look at a different finance leadership team. I guess I've been lucky. I've worked with a lot of finance leadership teams. Whoops. Let's go back again. All right. So this particular finance leadership team was a university, and they had all the different functions of finance: procurement, accounting, you know, strategic investing, contracting, etc. And the CFO saw an opportunity for closer collaboration. And you'll often find this is that leaders, from their vantage point, can see the value in collaborating. But this team, like many of those kinds of teams, they were in great resistance to doing strategic work together because they felt much greater loyalty to their functions than to the finance function as a whole. And they did not see any value whatsoever in collaboration. So we put together this interdependence scale here, and we put together some swim lanes here around operational stuff, planning stuff, strategic stuff. And we asked them to write on a Post-it note what are some of the major, you know, pieces of work or deliverables that they had along this continuum. And they began to realize as they put this together that there were key opportunities to collaborate and as a whole. And those were in the area of people development, one strategic phase to the rest of the university, and risk management. And so they, you know, it was kind of like they went from walking in with their arms crossed firmly, you know, with a scowl on their face to, you know, some of them, you know, arms on their hips wide open. Some of them, of course, were still, you know, they were going to be arms crossed no matter what I did. But a lot of them went, geez, we actually see that there's some value to our working together. And we can see that in essence, they convinced themselves that there were benefits to collaboration. And they identified where they would get value from some team development work, which was great for me as the person who was working with them, because then I could say, let's, you know, I wasn't working on things that they were, you know, not going to be interested in. I could really focus my effort on the areas where they were, where they saw the value. So a lot of times when leaders think about teaming, they have the relationship aspect of teams in mind. So they turn to, you know, personality inventories. How many of you guys have got that phone call? Can I do the Myers-Briggs? Or I want to do StrengthsFinder. And they help, they sense that if people understood each other better, that they would get along better. Or sometimes the leader will call you up and say, hey, let's just go have some fun together. Let's go bowling. So this is team building. And sometimes it's just the right solution. Victor Borge said, the shortest distance between two people is a laugh. And so sometimes just getting everybody to laugh together is a great idea. But team development looks more deeply across the whole life cycle of a team. The trick is that team building, generally you can do, in an afternoon, with a beer at a picnic, and doesn't involve sometimes a lot of effort. Team development actually takes an investment of time. So let's look at this idea of team development, looking deeply across the whole life cycle of teams. So I'm going to start this by zooming in on 4 challenges that teams face. These are 4 fundamental flows of activity that teams need to integrate over time. And the first is alignment and inspiration. And they need to be aligned around why they exist. And the actions in this flow focus on setting purpose and high-level strategy. They need to collaborate. And these activities are around knowing who's on the team, what their competencies and values are. They need to be clear about their deliverables and move their aspiration into perspiration. And the work around this is putting together a shared vision, goals, and tasks, and getting those all clarified. And then finally, they need to know how they can transfer those aspirations into results. And they do that in the form of decisions and operations. And interestingly, these 4 flows echo the concerns of different types of teams. So you often have visionary strategist leadership teams, cross-functional teams who are often tuned in on that relationship flow level, functional teams who are paying attention at how it is that you get things done, and the operational teams, implementation teams. Now, all of these teams do their work integrating these flows over time, moving between top-line freedoms and potential at the top and bottom-line constraints at the bottom. For example, let's say an HR organization might have a top-line aspiration around high-performing teams. So what they've discovered is that everybody has, their own model. Everybody's working with something else. We've got a little Tuckman, a little Lencioni. We've got some McChrystal. Everybody's got their own model. And so when people are moving and we're doing cross-boundary work or, different kinds of collaborative, those baton handoffs, people all have different languages of teaming. And people are getting confused. So this HR organization says, we've decided to select the Groves Team Performance Model as the tool of choice. Now, that's constraining. And of course, half the organization's all upset because their favorite team performance model gets left out. But the HR organization said, this is going to be our lingua franca for teaming. And that choice now frees them to focus and implement a training program that drives consistency across the organization. And they have an opportunity then to achieve high performance. So alignment, counterintuitively, alignment around constraint releases human creativity and moves it forward in the same way a river races faster when the banks become narrower. So the team performance model, shown here, integrates the set of predictable stages of team development across the 4 flows of team process: purpose and strategy, relationships, behavior, competence, vision, goals, and tasks, and operations and decisions. These 4 flows underlie the team performance model, and they came out of the work of Arthur Young, who was a physicist who was looking at a theory of process. So the thing about the Groves team performance model is that it's a process model, not a snapshot in time model. So we move from that freedom up there in purpose and strategy through constraint in operations and decisions in order to achieve freedom again. So let's just see. Any questions so far? So we're going to do a quick poll here. What do you find to be the source of team challenges? Is it the alignment and inspiration flow? Is it around collaboration? Is it about moving ideas into action with vision, goals, and tasks? Or is it around really getting clear on roles and decisions and operations? So I think Brian's going to push out a poll to everybody.
I'm having a bit of a glitch. It says that I'm logged in from another device, and I'm not. So if it's okay, yeah, just like Deborah is doing, can we just post the answers right into the chat?
Yeah, so let's see. Where is it that you guys, we've got at least one for moving ideas into action? All of them. I'm trying to see. Yes, the answer is definitely all of the above. So which are the ones that in your experience create some of the greatest sources of team challenges? Clear roles and goals.
And again, this is from the 4 options that
the
are
4
in front of
flows.
us. Mm-hmm.
How we work. So we're getting kind of a spread across here. My next question is, do the leaders of teams think the same way you think? When you get that phone call, what is it that they're often asking for? In my experience, what they're often asking for is, I've got some people issues on my team. I want you to solve my interpersonal stuff. And so then the question becomes, we get to put on our Sherlock Holmes hat. Is the source of the challenge effective collaboration, or is the source someplace else? So let's jump ahead here to Lauren. She's going, All right. So conflict mediation. That's what we need is a pretty picture to give everyone on board, i.e. strategy. So let's talk about, let's dive into the team performance model a little bit. So we're talking about creating a team. You'll notice that the team performance model is split into stages. There are the creating stages, which are these 4 stages here, listed down here, and then the sustaining stages over here. So Jack Gibb, who was an academic researcher on teams, identified 4 key questions that people have when they join a team. And they're reflected in the stages of the team performance model. So the first one is, why are we a team? Who is on the team? What will we do? And how will we work? And these are the creating stages that help a team orient for success. And satisfactory answers to these questions support team members to let go of individual agendas and commit to the work of a team as a team. So then the team is ready to work on implementation. And these are the sustaining stages. The questions are, who does what, when, and where? And this is all about sequencing the work. Think of this as like a Gantt chart or a project plan. This is the sequencing of the work. And then in implementation, and then in high performance, well, we've just got wow. And finally, we get to when teams achieve their charter or need to reconnect with, why are we here? We're in stage 7, which is renewal. So yes, so I think Thryne brought up a great point here. She says, in my organization, we define any group of people as a team, yet none of us collaborate. It's a false definition. And this is where that interdependence continuum comes in so powerfully, because if you try and treat this non-collaborating group of people as a team and do a bunch of, take them at this level of depth into teaming or team development, they'll all be completely resistant about it because they won't see the value of it. So figuring out where it is that collaboration is really needed is going to be a success factor for that kind of team. So let's just have a moment of questions, and let's see. Brian, you can see the screen. Is there anyone that has a question or a comment that would like to share a thought?
And everyone has the ability to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask directly.
Yeah.
This is Lauren. Just a comment that's really helpful to have this walkthrough and to see and to get your take on how the 4 flows align to that, and just where to break it down like this.
I guess I have a question. So if you are doing a facilitation that doesn't necessarily bring team performance into it, but you're observing team performance dynamics at work, to what extent do you bring it into the space that you happen to be in?
So in other words, when is it that I might share the team performance model as a way for the team to think about what it is that it's, where it might be stuck?
Mm-hmm. As a diagnostic tool.
Yeah. So that's a great question. I love bringing in the team performance model, especially with groups who like data and information. So, science folks, finance folks, actually a lot of people who are involved in lean and quality work really appreciate the power of a good model. And so if I feel like a team is sort of spinning around the axle, so here's a question for you guys. When you're working with teams, we'll say all teams need to start in orientation because they need to be given something to do. Where is it that they typically go next? Which stage of the model do you experience teams typically moving to next? Is it, do they nicely walk through this model, or, whoa, the teams Lauren's on go straight to 6, high performance. Yeah, they want high performance right away.
I don't know if they get there right away, but it's sort of like, let's go from orientation and we want high performance, but they're not aware of the pieces in between.
They're in between, yeah. So in my experience, a lot of times teams go straight to execution. So there we go. That's thank you, Dragonfly Consultants. So people go straight from stage 1 to stage 5. And so then they start running really fast. And I'm running south, and I look over and you're running, you know, hope maybe even southwest, or maybe you're even running east. And I'm looking at you and I say, what are you doing? And so then we have a little back and forth between 3 and 5. Well, you say, this is what it is I'm supposed to be doing. This is what, when, and where I'm supposed to be going. And I'm going, no. You've got the direction all wrong. And then maybe we argue a little bit about, you know, who's supposed to do what. And then we go back up here and we start running really fast again. And then the same thing happens all over again. And what happens is that we end up cycling here in this triangle between 3, 4, and 5. And at the Grove, we call that the Bermuda Triangle of teams. So in answer to your question, Brian, when might I bring in the team performance model? Is if I notice that a team is really cycling around between 3, 4, and 5, because that's where the work gets done, is in stage 3, 4, and 5. If I notice the team is really circling around in here, I might bring forward the team performance model and have them, and I'll ask them, you know, what do you guys, explain it to them, and then say, well, what do you guys think is going on? And they'll sort of do one of those, you know, smack, hand on forehead, give duh sound. And they'll say, you know, I thought we were going this way, and, you know, Juanita thought we were going that way, and Fred thought we were going that way. Boy, we really need to get clear about our goals. Because one of the interesting things about the team performance system here is that, and I'm breaking the rule, I'm on one slide for this long, is that there's fundamentality involved here. Stage 1, 2, 3, 4. So in other words, you need to know the ultimate result before you set your goals, before you figure out the roles, and before you figure out who's going to do what, when, and where. And trust building is one of those things where, if you're a Lencioni fan, you know, one of the things that he talks about is, if we can't have a forthright conversation here in trust building, we're not going to be able to effectively set goals together, because we're not going to tell each other, we're not going to share truth with each other. So this idea of fundamentality is really powerful.
Rachel had asked a related question a while back, and I want to make sure that we get it. She asked, how do you introduce this model to leaders when they come with a, quote, people problem?
That's a good question. Let me see which slide is next. I'm going to a different kind of conversation. So, so what I'll say to that person is, I'll say, what we need to do is we need to actually dig in and understand what the source of the people problem is. So if people are not trusting each other, let's say, you know, people are identifying this as a stage 2 problem, I'll actually ask them, you know, what's going on in implementation that might be causing that break in trust? Or do we have clarity about decisions? And decisions, in essence, is code for the word power. So down here in stage 4, you know, I'm making decisions that you thought you should be making, and that's creating the challenge. And then we go up here to goal clarification, is what's causing our source of stress, that we have, you know, different visions for what it is that we should be working towards as a solution. All of those things contribute to interpersonal tensions. And what's interesting there is that if you say, okay, let's go do some team building, we'll go someplace, we'll go on offsite, we'll do, we'll do the strengths finder, and then we'll do something, fun and experiential together. And everybody goes, oh, that guy that I thought was a jerk, he's actually, he actually really listened to me, and it was, I made a really powerful connection, and I go back to work with a renewed, sense that I'm going to be a little bit open-minded about it, but we get dumped back into the same system that created that interpersonal tension in the first place. And and then I'm in an even worse place, because then I thought, oh, that guy was being insincere. Because now, look, he's totally being a jerk again after, he pretended to really be paying attention to me. So that's what I do with leaders.
Thanks for that.
So,
one more question before we move on, and this one comes from Trina. And Trina asks, how do we explain to people that they're actually not a team, but instead that they're a group that happens to be sitting in the same space? I think this is breaking the news that they're not a team, they're a work group.
Yeah. That happened once when I was working with a whole human resources department that called themselves the human resources team. And so you had people on that team that were as diverse as, learning and development, payroll, hiring. So people had really disparate job descriptions. And they called me up because somebody, in hiring would call someone in training and say, hey, I got a burning platform. You have to drop everything and come and help me out. And the person in training would go, well, I got a bunch of burning platforms myself. I can help you tomorrow. And the first person who called was taking it personally, because this isn't how we work as a team. When you're a team, you drop everything and help each other, because everybody has these mental models of what teaming is. And so I did the interdependence continuum with them, and they realized, oh my gosh, we're actually not a team. We're a set of teams that are highly interdependent. Like everyone on the learning team is interdependent with each other and has shared goals, and they're really committed to each other. They need each other's capabilities. But each of our teams is together in an HR work group. And they all kind of went, oh, we want to be a team. And so then what I did is I used that same activity again, the interdependence continuum, and I said, well, I will bet that there are some areas where you actually do overlap, and in essence, the baton handoff points, and those points where collaboration would be valuable. And they realized that the whole hiring process was one that spanned multiple teams. And so then they brightened up and they were like, oh, good. This is where we can do teaming. I call it teaming. This is where we need to pay attention for the hiring process. What's the result we want to achieve in stage one? Who do we need to have on the team? What capabilities? What are our goals for hiring, and what's our vision for hiring? And then who does what part of the hiring process, so that when we jump over into stage 5 in implementation, we're really clear. We've got all of our ducks in a row here in the creating stages. So, all right, so I'm going to move on a little bit, and we'll jump back in again to where team performance grew out of. We did a lot of early work with a wide set of clients. Team Performance Model was launched in the 80s, and so since then we've added, a robust model that works across different levels of team. Most recently, we worked with Nike to create the Team Performance Survey, which is an online survey that measures a team's how resolved a team is around each of those challenges in the team performance model. And we've rolled out team performance worldwide with Philips in 2017. I was out in Kentucky last year working on a rollout with Humana. We're working on a rollout with Wells Fargo, who is in a major reinvention of itself right now. So this is just to give you a sense that team performance works across a wide variety of industries. So I'm going to go back to, I started this story with my finance leadership team from this global pharma company. And so it turned out we did the team performance survey, which is a great way to engage technical people, you know, the people like data. They were a working group of really smart financial technical guys, and I wanted to get them hooked into a productive conversation. And I was hired to do a half-day team development session before they went wine tasting in Napa. And I thought, okay, well, they've got me out here, you know, because they want to look like they're doing something when really all they want to do is go wine tasting. So I thought, well, I got to get them hooked. So they acknowledged that they were not aligned on finance implementation policies. And a lot of them were really unhappy about that. And then there was this idea of this uneven commitment to the finance leadership team. And trust had been eroded. And so we administered the team performance survey. And what it showed was that the further you were from corporate headquarters, the less aligned the team was around the team's purpose. And so I actually never even gave them the results of the survey, because I thought, you know, if I share these, you know, survey results with a bunch of techie guys, I've lost them entirely. So I gave them a flyover of their results, and I told them the story about fundamentality, how one thing needs to happen before another. And they said, okay, even though we're really irritated about the implementation systems not being aligned, we kind of get it that we're disconnected around purpose, because when you were in Japan or Brazil or something, it turned out that you thought the purpose of the finance leadership team was to get together in really beautiful places around the world on a quarterly basis and go wine tasting or whatever. The folks who were at corporate thought the purpose of the finance leadership team was to actually develop finance policy for the organization. So I actually got them sucked into, you know, a really vigorous conversation, so much so that they didn't want to stop, and we had to kick them out to go get the bus for wine tasting. So I considered that to be a huge success. So you'll notice here that in this picture, the balls, sometimes it's called the bouncing ball model, don't touch the platform. There's a gap here, which is different than your typical team performance model. You'll notice there, it touches the platform. So what do you think the platform represents? Who in a team's universe does the platform represent? Put your guesses there in the chat. Let's see if anybody gets it. What is it that a team needs to bounce against in order to really get a lift? Somebody says customer. Ooh, that's a good one. Reality. Yeah. Well, it's right down there at constraint. Okay. All right, we'll give you the answer. It's leadership and the organization. So how many of you have ever worked with a team that said, we can't set goals because the leadership team above us is unclear about their direction. So we can't, you know, we got our hands tied, or we're sitting on our hands. This is a great example, you know, if you imagine I'm walking down the I'm from California, and I'm walking down the road, and I got my beach volleyball, and you know, I got my beverage of choice in hand, and we're walking down the sidewalk, and I'm bouncing my ball, and I'm having a great time, and I'm chatting away with my friends, and I don't notice when I step on the sand, blah, what happens to my ball? Well, when it hits the sand, there's no bounce. And the same is true with leadership in the organization. So this is where if you've got really clear organizational support, the team has the capability then, if it's done its own work well in stages 1 through 4, to really get a lift off in stage 5 and 6. There was one team that I worked with, they called me up, and they said, you know, it was a team that was made up of people from all different functions across the organization. It's a molecule development team. And they said, you know, Laurie, we're having big problems with our lawyer. You know, and he's just not reliable. He's just not making his commitments, and it's really hanging up the team. And we've met with him, and he seems to be committed. So they're looking at stage 4. Okay, he seems to be, you know, committed, but he's just not cutting it. And so I said, okay, I'll come in and help you out. And this is an interpersonal problem, right? Everyone is really starting to distrust this lawyer. They're getting angry with him. So they're perceiving it as a stage 2, you know, lack of collaboration, lack of commitment, lack of consistency and reliability problem. So I go in and so I do a bunch of interviews, and I talk to this guy, and it turns out this one lawyer was on 6 teams, each of which needed about 30-40% of his time. Now, you don't have to be a math whiz to know that this poor lawyer had not one team ready to kill him. He had 6 teams ready to kill him because he just couldn't, there wasn't enough of him to go around. So I went back to the team and I said, you know, this isn't a team problem. This is a platform problem. There just literally are not enough lawyers to go around. And so the team all kind of went, oh, and their anger actually turned to compassion because they realized, you know, the state that this poor lawyer was in. So the team all bundled themselves up. So they went to the organization and they said, give us more lawyers. And what do you think the organization said? Yeah, right. You haven't typed it in, but I all know that you're going, nah. So, but then because they had identified the problem correctly as being a platform problem, they could then solve it as a platform problem as opposed to thinking they had to fix the lawyer. And so what they did is they got all the project managers together on those 6 different teams. And those 6 teams decided who needs the lawyer most when. And they sorted this all out. And then they went back to the organization and they said, you know, because you are not resourcing us with enough lawyers, we are not going to be able to meet the time schedule that you have set out for us. And the organization, you know, threw a temper tantrum and stomped around just like Rumpelstiltskin. But because all 6 teams went to the organization aligned and really clear and had done their homework, it was really clear to the organization that this was reality, to use Brian's term. So don't underestimate the power of the platform in this work and how invisible sometimes that is in the team and is often the source of team issues. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into each of the different stages of the team performance model. And so stage, before we do that, any questions so far? If anything comes up, pop them on the.
Lauren is suggesting that you should deliver this as a TED Talk.
Hey, there we go. Good. So let's jump in here into orientation. Now, orientation, that's stage 1. And you can see that next to it, there are a set of behaviors here. These are these are called the resolved behaviors, and these are called the unresolved behaviors. And it's the key question, why am I here? And what you're working towards is resolving that, the answer to that question, by clarifying purpose, identity, and membership. And if you are doing a diagnostic of a team and you're seeing a lot of disorientation, uncertainty, and fear, you might go, maybe we've got a lack of clarity in stage 1. So the key questions that I'm looking at here is, does the team have a well-defined purpose? And does everybody understand it? The typical issue is when I administer the team performance survey, and a lot of the team says, you know, no, we don't really know what our purpose is. And the leader says, but I'm telling them what our purpose is all the time. These people are not listening to me. And I said, well, leader, that's because that's your job, is to be paying attention to purpose. Most of the folks on your team have other jobs. So, you know, you gotta just keep that in front of people all the time. So next is, do individuals identify with the team? So let's talk about what that means. And does everyone feel included? So the way I think about that is, do individuals identify with the team? This is the why am I here? And the question that people are asking is, can I actually make a difference on this team? And bringing the skills and attributes that I have. And then the next question is, why are we here? And, you know, does everyone feel like they're included and part of the team? And a lot of your diversity and inclusion stuff ends up actually sort of fitting into this part right here, because where it is that people feel that they are not going to be able to completely contribute as a whole human being to the efforts of the team because of, you know, fill in your blank on your diversity and inclusion, you know, issues and opportunities, then they never actually fully become part of the team from the very start. So, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about really quickly is the unresolved issues, which is disorientation and uncertainty. And I'm actually going to go backwards really quickly to this right here. And there's this relationship here between leadership in the organization in stage 1. So if you imagine that there was an arrow that went between the platform here and stage 1, and that's where the team charter comes in. And if the team gets a really good charter from the organization, this is our set of expectations from you, then there's a level of confidence in the purpose. And so where you don't have that, you get this disorientation, that uncertainty. Remember that story I was telling you about where, well, the leadership of the organization isn't really clear about where we're going, so we can't actually set plans or do anything. It's like, that's a great example of where the platform is not doing a good job of chartering effectively with the team. So next is trust. And so can you remember of the 4 flows where trust is? It's a test. So this is the relationship flow. And so to resolve this, do team members view each other with mutual regard? So when I'm working with teams and I administer the team performance survey, or even I'm just interviewing the team leader or team members, and this is one of the key questions that I ask is, do people respect each other on this team? They may not necessarily like each other, but do they have a fundamental level of mutual regard for each other? If that is missing, you're in trouble. This is work. You're going to have work, because that means that the relationship bank has been overdrawn, and really rebuilding that kind of mutual regard is going to be a big part of what you're all about. The next one is, are members open and honest? And I do a lot of work, in the Midwest, and the South also kind of fits. I guess some of you are in Virginia. You're kind of borderline, but you're close to Washington, so you get that, you get the spillover effect. But in the Midwest, there's this thing called Midwest Nice. Do we have any folks here that are on the call from the Midwest that know what I'm talking about? This idea of Midwest Nice. Yep. So
we have something like that close to here, and it sounds like this. It's called Bless Your Heart.
There we go. Bless your heart. And so this is an area where it's, unless you are in Amsterdam or parts of New Jersey or New York, the chances are that there is a level of, what's the word, untransparency? What's the right word? There's a lack of transparency that is that's often there, especially around conflict. And this is where I love Lencioni's work, because he really makes a really clear case for why it is that openness and honesty is absolutely critical to an organization. And frankly, people are just not skillful. They are just not skillful in this. And so I often find myself, using things like the pinch crunch model, or giving people little communication formulas. I was working with a team the other day, and there's what is it? It's the SBI, Situation, Behavior, Impact model. And I thought, this model is just not going to fly with this group. So I went on the internet and I discovered the BEER model, which stood for behavior, expectation, something, and it ended with a request. And I thought, oh, this is perfect for this team. So skilling people up is really valuable. And then, are members reliable and consistent with each other? And my little story here about the lawyer is an example of a lack of perceived unreliability. So if we look here over on the left, the behavior that we're seeing if it's unresolved are caution, mistrust, and facade, which should all make sense to everybody. So beer model, there we go. He's got it. Behavior, effect, expectation, and result. I did request. So thanks, Brian, in the chat. So the third stage is goal clarification. And in this stage, the focus is what are we doing? And where's our attention turning to? And so the first key is, are the team's work assumptions explicit? Now, what the heck does that mean? You know, that's not very explicit. So work assumptions are often invisible success factors. A team member needs to go like, you know, how do we get things done around here? Imagine somebody joins a team and they're a new member of a team, and you know, they're trying to get their work done. They're going to try and find a buddy to say, you know, well, I went to the, you know, the new hire orientation and this and that and the other, but how do we really get things done around here? And who do I need to know? And so this part here, what parts of the work need close cooperation? And an activity that you can use to help make the team's work assumptions more explicit are that interdependence continuum. I just think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then work assumptions often exist around communications as well. We actually had a whole meeting in our office because we work as a distributed organization. And we hammered out, when do we email, when do we text, et cetera, et cetera. And it made a huge difference in because people knew that when they got a text, they had to jump on it, et cetera. So in the final key in our, in goal clarification, so we have the team's work assumptions explicit. The next one are the goals clear and integrated. The goals clear, that's usually pretty clear. Integrated, so this is in the world that we work in today, where teams are as often as not, they're made up of people from across boundaries. They are people often, you know, there are points where I'm on, you know, team A and team B, and sometimes I'm on team B and team C, et cetera. So the goals need to be integrated not only from, you know, what's the ultimate result our organization is trying to achieve and how does my team fit in with that, but also how do my personal goals connect up with the team's goals, connect up with that larger organizational goals. And then this whole horizontal thing around making sure that we've got integration across cross-boundary teams that need to do those baton hands-offs. And then finally, is the vision shared? And extensive research on sports performance shows that high performers can really envision success and see it vividly. And of course, the same is true for teams. And then when the vision is shared, the goals are clear, and your team is, you know, they're ready to go. They've been wanting to move straight to implementation to begin with, and you've been holding them back, talking about goals. And so attention moves to the question, how are we going to get it done? But before we go there, remember the leader who wanted to go bowling? So like many folks who think that the most significant source of their troubles lie in people getting along with people, it turns out we're going to turn that idea on its head. And during his work as an organizational development and transformation consultant, Noel Tyke, who many of you are familiar with, analyzed a bunch of team conflicts based on the good old grippy model. And I bet Brian has got that to throw up onto the onto the into the chat. Oh, you've never heard of the Grippy model? Well, we'll talk about it. And what he observed here, and I'm going to bring in my slide, and every slideshow has to have at least one of these, right? Grippy stands for goals, roles, processes, and interactions. And a lot of folks come in and say, you know, let's go bowling. I got some interpersonal schmutz going on my team. You know, let's fix that. But it turns out that 80%, according to Knoll's research, of conflicts in team were attributed to unclear goals. Now, of that remaining 20%, you know, 100% of the issues minus 80% is 20%. It turns out, once again, 80% of those are attributed to roles. 80% of what's left over attributed to processes, and only 1%, less than 1%, are attributed to, you know, interpersonal relationships. And so I want to just flag here. This is my one of my advertisements, kind of promotions for spending time to actually work and get clear on goals, is that ambiguity at these more fundamental levels has an impact on the ensuing levels, and problems at lower levels are often symptoms of conflicts at one of the previous stages of the model. So if goals aren't clear, uncertainties in individual roles will arise. If roles are unclear, this results in cumulative conflict within the processes. And then if processes unclear, accumulated conflicts at higher levels appear at the people level. So important to do that early work. So this is why I do my little spiel here on the, you know, it's one of those go slow to go fast kinds of things. And you'll get a lot of resistance from teams because teams are under so much pressure these days. They really feel a huge amount of agony about needing to get straight to results and implementation. And you just have to tell them you're going to be, you know, riding around in that Bermuda Triangle of teams, so you can spend your time having a good conversation up front, or you can pay for it in agony later. I'm that kind of, you know, warm, fuzzy consultant. So the team is now ready to work on the commitment stage. And so this is the how will we do it. And we've got some specific things that we're working on here in commitment, which is, are all roles clearly defined? And are resources allocated and well managed? And is there an understanding of how decisions are made? So here, you know, everybody loves to hate the racy, but in terms of roles, it actually works. And the trick here when you're doing a racy, because talk to any team and you say, hey, let's do a racy. You know, who's responsible, who's accountable, who do we need to consult before decisions, who do we need to inform after decisions? And you get this sort of, the whole team will groan and we'll say, we're only going to do the racy for those areas where we've done our interdependence continuum. We're only going to do them for those areas that are in the formidable middle, because that's where the role conflict creates problems. And I think some of the rest of this is pretty clear, other than the fact that is there an understanding of how decisions are made, generally is pretty much forgotten about until somebody makes a decision and everybody else feels like they should have been involved and they weren't. So over here under unresolved, we have dependence and resistance. And resistance is pretty clear. So if I look at this, if I know on stage 1 what our big purpose is, I got a sense of who's on the team. I know what the goals are. Now I'm ready to commit. I am ready to throw myself fully into this and translate it into action. But if I don't really know what our ultimate result is, and I don't feel the organization is supporting us, if I'm not really feeling like I can trust my team members, if I don't really know what it is we're going to do, you get down to the commitment stage and you're asking people to sign up for, the work that they're going to do. And not surprisingly, you get some resistance. So it's actually a wise response. So going back here now to dependence, this is really interesting under commitment, is that has anybody been on a team where the leader was just one of the most inspiring human beings? And you would cross oceans to do the work that this leader brought forward on the team. Well, then the question becomes, what happens if the team if that team leader disappears? And it turns out oftentimes teams in that situation will fall apart because rather than being committed to the actual goals and work of the team, they were committed to the person. It's an interesting thing that happens. So this idea of creating a team, it's all about trial and error. And even though the balls are kind of in order and there's a fundamentality to them, there's a back and forth. In other words, you build trust by having conversations about what the goals are. And you might clarify your purpose as you begin to work on your vision. So when your team sets its course and really commits to roles, resources, and decision-making, you probably feel a real release of energy. You get the bounce. And the team is really, in the metaphor of the team performance model, your team is really ready to make the turn. And we talk in here, this stage 4 commitment, we call it the turn, taking the turn. And that's because we go from being a set of ideas about the possibility of this team, creating work and effort and results, to actually now getting to work. And this is the point where people say, I'm on board or not. And it's a really critical point. And you'll also notice that that's the point where the team hits the platform and they go back to the organization. They say, we can do this for you, but you're going to need to fund us this way or resource us this way, or, so then there's a whole dialogue that happens there around resources in stage 4. So stage 5, implementation. Brian, how much time do you need at the end to just wrap things up?
Not long. Take your time.
Okay. So stage 5, implementation. They're switched now because we're going up the other side of the model. Resolved behaviors are clear processes. In other words, do people on the team understand how things are to be done? Are the actions of the team in alignment? And are the time targets being met? I.e., is this kind of disciplined execution around who does what, when, and where? And this is where a visible schedule, strategy, and processes liberates the team to move into action confidently. And conflicts and confusion arise when there's commitment, but we don't have clarity around, who does what, when, and where. In essence, the processes of the team. And if we're so lucky, we hit the high performance wow state as a team really masters its processes and begins to experience the ability to change goals as well as achieve them. Now, can you remember which of the 4 flows high performance is in? Does anybody remember? Is it in the aspiration flow, relationship flow, translating to action flow? Yeah, you got it. It's the relationship flow. So high performance relies not only in a team mastering its processes, teams achieve a flow state when trust is high, people have mastered their roles, and everyone responds as if they're really part of a whole. And that's where you get that spontaneous interaction. The team's interactions are uninhibited and stimulating. The team's exceeding expectations. It's synergistic. And then are the results exceptional? The shadow side of high performance is overload. If you think about how many times you've been on a high performing team, and there's people just literally can sometimes burn out because people get just so excited about meeting the particular challenge of that team, and they just work themselves to death. So the other thing that can take a team out of high performance is some kind of disharmony. Often people get poached off a team because leaders of teams go, whoa, that's a high performing team, I want some of that. And they'll grab people, or they'll grab the leader, and then the secret sauce goes missing. And finally, we get to renewal, where there's recognition for the work done, and a recognition that the work is really valued. And in stage 7 is often the stage that gets really completely ignored on teams in the rush from one project to the next. Or if people are on multiple teams now, we're seeing there's even more of a tendency to just skip the stage 7, learning and celebration, because people are on so many teams, they just move straight from, team challenge A to, team B challenge. So over time, the conditions that initially set your team into motion will change. So it's the external environment can change, and this why continue reminds us that team performance is an ongoing process. And so spending a little time periodically, even with a thriving team, on renewal, puts your team back in touch with meaning and purpose and refreshes everyone's commitment to keep going. So renewal can be a challenge for some implementation teams. I did a bunch of work with the Houston airport systems, and these are the folks who clean the bathrooms and clean all the airport. And, we're talking, this is a paint the Golden Gate Bridge job. You start at one end of the airport, you clean it, and then you go all the way back to the beginning and you start all over again. And so how do you keep a team energized when every day is the same? That's one of the things to pay attention to. So that's where boredom or burnout could show up. And in the Houston airport systems, we put together a whole bunch of systems or structures for people to recognize each other, and so that there was acknowledgement and people got to feel like, yeah, the work I'm doing is actually really valuable and people are noticing it. The next one is around change mastery, is the team's approach to change, and active and adaptive. And are we paying attention to the team's energy, and that it helps encourage staying power? So if the team's work is completed, renewal is the time to wrap things up and freeing members to move on to new challenges, because sometimes the charter is complete and it's time to move on. So those are the stages of the team performance model. We've got a few moments left. And one of the questions becomes, when is it that we do team development work? And so these are a set of success strategies that are organized by stage of the team performance model. And so when team leaders come to you, they will typically not say, I need to do a little work in orientation to clarify my purpose. You know, they'll say something like, I'm going to kick off a team, or I'm going to form a team. And so this is the plain English version of, you know, the kinds of work that you do in each stage of the team performance model to help keep a team in line and moving forward. And so you'll notice that over there in stage 5, we have conflict resolution, to which we're saying, isn't that a stage 2 or a relationship flow issue? And the reason we put it there is because a lot of times that's where the conflict shows up, just like we saw in the Noel Tyke slide, is that conflict shows up when all stuff going on in all the previous stages isn't really clear. So your conflict resolution might show up in stage 5, but the work that you do to solve it might be in stages 1 through 4 and including 5. So to what do the page numbers refer? Aha! There is a book that the Grove produces. I should have had a picture of it here. It's called the Team Leader Guide. And each of these pages here are a set of best practices that you can do to do those things. So there's a set of different best practices that you can do for project planning on page 166 to page 167, for instance. So, and then, yeah, this is just making a point that best practice, there we go, Brian's thrown that up in the chat, thank you. And then, so this is my grand finale slide that just says, in a time of networks, multiple team assignments, cross-boundary teams, and virtual work, the common idea about what a team is and isn't is rapidly evolving. You know, what people's expectations are is also rapidly evolving. And our hope, the Grove, is that the team performance model provides an operating system to good teaming that helps you and your teams move effectively and with confidence to work more effectively together. So that's my ta-da slide.
Okay, Laurie, thank you very much. Before we open it up for questions, if you don't mind, just go ahead and use the chat to show your appreciation to Laurie and taking your time out to talk with us. And while that's coming in, Laurie, you probably didn't want me to share this, but she actually has walking pneumonia. And in spite of that, she still showed up to, you know, give us 90 minutes of her valuable time. And Laurie, I want you to know that there's a gift that's coming your way from NOVA Scribes.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to post a couple of links in the chat right now for where you can go for more. One of them is the Grove Tools, which is where you get all your Grove stuff. And this is a link that will take you directly to more tools that are specifically geared towards the team performance model. The other thing that I will go ahead and post right now is the link to the workshops. There are 2 that are scheduled in San Francisco on the team performance model, one at the end of August, the other one at the beginning of November. And I am going to take it as a personal task to see if I can't convince Laurie to come out here and teach a team performance class on the East Coast with us. Couple of other things. Please share your sketch notes. I saw some of you drawing. Please share your sketch notes on the meetup page. And while you're at it, please check out Trina's notes on systems thinking. She recently posted sketch notes for the last meetup that we had on systems thinking. So please check those out. The next meetup that we're going to have is going to be delivered by Rob Colenso, who is a design thinking guru, on June 21st at 6:30. It's on building creative confidence through sketching. I also want to extend an invite to everybody who's on the channel right now to the annual Welcome Heather Barbecue, and you can find out a little bit more about that also on NOVA Scribes. That's going to be on Saturday, the 23rd of June at 6 p.m. at my place. We've also launched a new Slack channel, and I'm going to go ahead and post that in the chat so that we can go ahead and keep the conversation going. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but if there's any follow-on questions for Laurie, please feel free to hang out for a few more minutes. Thank you very much, everybody.